And now I will admit them all. Okay. Good evening and welcome. We'd like to first thank everyone for joining us this evening. I'm Kathy Tyler, and I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Affairs, the Atlanta Department of Transportation. We've invited residents, business owners, representatives in the neighborhood associations tonight. We met in November, so this is our follow-up meeting, and Betty will talk about that more later. Your trust and most importantly, your input will determine our success in the work that we do to make roadways safer here in Atlanta. Whether you're walking, taking transit, driving, or other forms of transportation to travel throughout the city, we know that safety is our #1 priority for everyone. This evening, we will hear first from our Department of Strategy and Planning Director, Betty Smoot-Madison, whom we are so proud to claim as a nationally recognized leader in mobility strategy and planning. And she will introduce you to our distinguished design engineers who are joining us tonight. But before we do that, I want to offer up some housekeeping details. We've muted your microphones to avoid any background noise. People who are attending tonight are reminded to conduct themselves in the same decorum and standards of behavior appropriate for any public hearing or public meeting. Because of the number of people we invited, we have put in a Q&A. We're asking you to put in your questions in the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen, any comments or questions. And our team will respond to as many as possible before the hour is over. We also encourage you to please stay in contact with your MPU chairs and your council members on transportation projects in your community. Your council representative receives a monthly project update from our team. And now I would like to hand this meeting over to our leader, Betty Smoot-Madison.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. On behalf of the City of Atlanta Department of Transportation, thank you for joining this LMIG Resurfacing and Redesign Project meeting for 5th Street. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Betty Smoot-Madison. I serve in the role of Mobility Planning Director for ATLDOT. That's generally what we call it, so you'll hear us say that probably from this point on. We did host an introductory meeting back in November, as Kathy mentioned, just to sort of introduce this project to the community. And committed to coming back with our final proposed recommendations after we had conducted all of our studies. So that includes traffic and crash analysis and parking along the corridor, along with collecting and considering community input and comments. So that's the intent for today's meeting. Our team has a brief presentation for this evening, and then we'll open it up for any questions or comments at the end. In addition to Kathy and myself, we are also joined by others from ATLDOT. Our Commissioner, Solomon Cavanis, may or may not join. I actually can't see because I'm sharing my screen. I can't see who's in the room, but hello to him if he's on. Chris Rome, who's our Senior Multimodal and Design Engineering Director, and Corey Clawender, also one of our in-house design engineers in training. And then we also have Simeon Robinson, who's from our capital projects team, and he's our construction director. All right. So the One Atlanta Strategic Transportation Plan, which is what I like to refer to as ATLDOT's blueprint for success, it's really established and solidified our Vision Zero goal of reducing crashes and ultimately saving lives by eliminating the most severe and fatal crashes. And so we do this by taking every opportunity to make Atlanta streets safer, such as incorporating safety interventions into projects such as this, resurfacing and restriping. It's a great strategy to somewhat quickly make streets safer when we are already doing maintenance projects, as opposed to doing sort of full capital projects processes. We really want to make sure that our streets are safer for all users, but especially the most vulnerable users, and that's your pedestrians and bicyclists, transit riders, and other micromobility users. Those are really the people who are most susceptible to life-changing and adverse consequences, such as serious injury or even death if involved in a crash. And so this type of work really is important to, I would say, everyone, as I'm sure most of us can say that we have been impacted, in some way by a traffic crash. But for ATLDOT, it's even more personal because we lost our Vision Zero manager, Kimberly Sargent, just last year to a traffic crash. She was simply walking to dinner with friends and was struck by a car. And she was never able to recover from her injuries. So this work, the work that we're doing, Vision Zero and safety improvements, this work is really in honor of Kimberly, but in honor of all of the people who have lost their lives or have lost loved ones as a result of a traffic crash.
Hey, Betty.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Chris and I can't see the presentation.
Oh, let's see what's happening here. Am I sharing my screen? Hold on. Let me try. Okay. Is that it? Sorry, y'all.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. I don't think you missed too much as far as slides or visuals. But so just again, to provide a little bit more background on LMIG, which stands for Local Maintenance and Improvement Grant. It's an annual allocation of funding from the Georgia Department of Transportation to local governments throughout the state for routine maintenance of the local road system or streets that are not on the state route system. ATLDOT primarily utilizes these funds for standard asphalt street resurfacing, restriping or striping of those streets, and some ADA improvements such as curb ramps. And so the project that we'll be discussing tonight, 5th Street, is a part of the LMIG 2021 program, and that is anticipated to start construction in early summer 2023. So a little bit of background about the process of how we select streets to be on the LMIG list each year. So we utilize something that's called a pavement condition index, or PCI for short, to identify and determine needed road maintenance. So every 3 to 5 years or so, we'll conduct an analysis of our pavement. And one of the deliverables is a map like the one that you see to the right of your screen, which basically gives us a segment by segment condition rating for that street, or all streets in the city. The PCI ranges from 0 to 100. And so 0, of course, being in very poor condition. And a lot of times if it's at 0, there may be some subsurface issues. And so reconstruction may be necessary if it's deteriorated that badly. And then on the other end of the spectrum is 100, being in excellent condition. And in those cases, that road probably has been very recently resurfaced. And so we generally start to consider streets for resurfacing once they get to around like 60 and below. So the PCI really is the main driver for how we select streets, but then there may be some other influences, such as if council members or constituents reach out to us and let us know that there are some issues on a particular street, and we may consider those to be added to the list. All right, and then once streets have been placed on the LMIG list, based on that PCI or other requests, we do an additional layer of screening to determine if there are opportunities for inclusion of safety improvements, such as bike and pedestrian improvements. We look through past plans, so that may include the 2018 adopted Atlanta Transportation Plan or Cycle Atlanta 1.0 and 2.0 plans. Other partner plans, so like the Beltline or CIDs may also have mobility and transportation plans, or even a neighborhood may have transportation studies. So we do try to screen all of those for to see if the streets that are on our list have been called out for any specific recommendations. And if so, we'll go ahead and try and incorporate what we can into the resurfacing project. And the good thing about if they are in these plans, that means that they've undergone some level of public and community engagement, and generally have support if the recommendations made it into the plan. Now, there are some cases where We also look at just logical connections and extensions to existing facilities or planned facilities, which is kind of the case with Fifth Street. So sometimes specific segments may not, or specific streets may not necessarily be in a plan, but they just make good logical connections for mobility. Then we'll take those into consideration for design interventions. All right, and so as a part of the 2021 LMIG, we have 4 streets that we are proposing redesigns on. The full 2021 program consists of about 50 or more streets, but there are 4, and they're listed here, that we are proposing safety improvements on. And we've had meetings. This is actually our final meeting for this week. We've had 4 community meetings this week with each of these, with the communities for each of these streets. And so we're happy to be kind of wrapping this part of the process up. And let's see, I think now we'll start to get into, okay. So we will dive a little bit more into the details. So the project limits are for Fifth Street are between Myrtle Street on the western end and Charles Allen Drive on the eastern end. The pavement condition ranges between 59 and 72. So this just means that there are some segments that are in fair condition, while there are others that are in pretty good condition. But the resurfacing project will bring the full length of the street up to a state of good repair. So this was a corridor that we suggested improvements on based on, just making good logical connections, specifically to the planned Fifth Street Complete Street project. We do want to mention what we heard from the community. So we had a 30-day public comment period that started from the date of initial notice about the project in early November to about the second week of December or so. And so this slide just sort of highlights not all, but these are the general consensus of and kind of representative comments that we heard overall from the community. Emphasizing the importance of retaining on-street parking, many of the concerns of security at night if people have to park blocks away, as well as just access for older and less mobile residents. There were also just comments around the general character and the look and feel of the community and not wanting an excessive amount of striping. And so we definitely heard those comments, and we appreciate everyone taking the time to submit their concerns to us. And while safety really is ATLDOT's, ultimate priority, that will always be our end goal. We really do take the time to listen and hear what communities are concerned about. And we try to make adjustments where we can without compromising safety too much. All right, so now I will turn it over to our design engineers. Corey Clawender is going to talk through the next few slides and provide just our study findings and our proposed design recommendations.
Thanks, Betty. Hey, everybody. As she said, my name is Corey Clawender. I am engineer in training on the in-house design team here. So we looked at a lot of different characteristics of the roadway to inform our recommendations for this street. What you're seeing here is a figure that depicts traffic speed and traffic volume on Fifth Street. As you can see, this does corroborate the community's claim that this is a low volume, low speed street. The traffic volumes are pretty low. They're actually highest in the study area on Argonne Avenue, and everywhere else on Fifth Street, they're relatively much lower. The 85th percentile speed here is estimated at 19 miles an hour, which is what we want to see because the posted speed limit is 25 miles an hour, and so anything under that is preferred. It's worth noting at this time that this is just an estimate. It's based on big data, and it averages out over the segments what the potential likely 85th percentile speed is. And so until we go out there and actually measure the speeds on this roadway, we can't be 100% sure that this is what the speeds are. But at this point in time, this estimate is what we want to see. Next slide, please. So we also took a look at relative bicycle activity for all the different streets in the study area. So what you can see here is Charles Allen Drive and Argonne Avenue really jump out as the highest traveled bicycle streets in the area. But as far as east to west connections go, Fifth Street, especially between Myrtle Street and Argonne Avenue, is one of the highest rated for bicycle activity. And we expect that to really increase as the Fifth Street Complete Street project is completed and ends at Myrtle Street. So any cyclists that are traveling eastbound on that complete street project will end up in the study area, so increasing that volume. Next slide, please. So we also took a look at pedestrian crossing activity to determine where there's pedestrians crossing at places where there may not be crossing accommodations. So one particular location jumped out at us. It was the intersection of Oglethorpe Avenue with the northern leg of Durant Place. There's a pretty high rate of pedestrian crossing activity here and no existing crosswalk. So we are recommending a crosswalk at this intersection. Next slide, please. We also took a deep dive into the crash history for all of these corridors. So what you're seeing here is a heat map of the reported crashes along the corridor. So as you can see, there's a relatively low rate of crashes occurring on 5th Street, especially when you compare it to crash hotspots that exist on Ponce de Leon and on Juniper and Piedmont, which further reinforces that this is a relatively safe street. Next slide, please. So again, we looked at crash severity as well. We wanted to especially target places where there were serious, minor, or any injuries and also fatalities. So we could recommend safety improvements that are in line with our Vision Zero goals. But we didn't see any fatalities in the study area. It's all property damage only, which again reinforces that this is a relatively safe street. Next slide, please. So one of the biggest concerns we heard from the community was surrounding the removal of on-street parking, because our original proposal was to remove on-street parking for half of 5th Street, just between Myrtle Street and Argonne Avenue, which would match the cross-section of the 5th Street's Complete Street project. So we wanted to go out and verify whether that was feasible based on the parking occupancy. So we went out to 5th Street at 4 different times and counted the number of parked cars, and then average that together to get what you see here. So each of these segments is color coded by the percent occupation on average. And then the labels have 2 numbers. The first number is the number of parked cars on average on that segment. And the second number is the number of legally available parking spaces. So as you can see from this, 5th Street is very highly occupied when it comes to parking. And it was so highly occupied, we even saw some illegal parking in a lot of different places and some over occupancy. But before we could remove parking from half of 5th Street on the section that I mentioned, we wanted to really get a picture of what the worst case scenario was, because we understand from the community that there are many events and other times where parking occupancy is much higher than the average day. So next slide, please, Betty. So this map depicts that worst case scenario, basically. For every single segment, each segment is depicting the worst, or rather the highest rate of parking occupancy that we observed on any of the 4 days. So these segments may not be on the same day, but we're putting it all together to see what it could look like if everything came onto 5th Street at the same time. And so, as you can see, from Myrtle Street to Argonne Avenue on 5th Street, if everything went wrong and everybody was parking on that section of 5th Street, the rate of parking occupancy would be higher than 50% along that segment, which indicates to us that it is not feasible to remove parking in that area. Coupled with the fact that we didn't see any safety issues such as speeding or crash rates or anything else to indicate that we would need to do that. So we are no longer recommending removing parking from that section of 5th Street. So next slide, please. So here is our proposed typical section for 5th Street. We propose to resurface the road and then add sharrows throughout the corridor at strategic locations and wayfinding signage to direct people to and from the 5th Street cycle track and from Charles Allen Drive. Next slide, please. So here's a plan view representation of our recommendations. In general, we propose to retain all legal existing on-street parking. The legal part is really important because we did see a high rate of illegal parking along the corridor, which presents a safety issue because it obstructs side distance at a lot of the intersections. So we also propose to install sharrows and wayfinding signage. We want to better delineate illegal parking spaces that are problematic, like I mentioned, those at intersections especially. And then we want to replace existing curb ramps with ADA compliant ramps where required. And then 2 specific spot locations that we want to improve are the intersection of 5th Street with Argonne Avenue. We want to make some signing and marking improvements to improve sight distance at that area. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, we propose a crosswalk at the intersection of Argonne, or rather 5th Street, and the northern leg of Durant Place. And so those are our recommendations for 5th Street. I'll pass it back to you, Betty.
All right, thanks, Corey. So I know we've thrown a lot of information at you guys tonight, but we'd like to just kind of give you an overview or summary of everything that our team looks at when we're conducting these types of studies. And when we're proposing improvements, we really do like to fully understand everything that's happening on the street. So we just wanted to share as much of that data as possible without overburdening you with too much information. So I just have a few more slides that I'll kind of run through, and then we'll open it up for any questions or comments that you guys may have. So this is the final time that we'll meet. We'll be meeting with the community for this particular project. And based on discussions tonight, we will advance it into final design. Once designs have been finalized, our crews will begin construction in early summer 2023. And again, that's for the full 2021 LMIG program, which has, again, 50+ streets on it. Where this particular street will fall in that overall program, we're not sure at this time, but we anticipate the overall construction timeline for the full program will be between early summer, June, and December 2023 at the latest. Weather is always a factor in our timelines. We also send out notices about 7 to 14 days prior to us starting on your street, so that you just have advance notice to move parked cars, and et cetera. So if there are any changes to the construction timeline, we'll definitely be sure to communicate that to you guys, and especially through the council member. What else we have? Okay, and just from the 4 streets that we are proposing some sort of safety designs on, we will be adding more than 2+ miles of safer streets to our road network. Again, our core priorities at ATLDOT are safety. And while based on studies and public comment received for 5th Street, we were able to make some concessions and along the street and retain most of the parking here. That may not always be the outcome on every street that we propose these types of recommendations on, because safety is ultimately our goal. And we want to make sure that every user of our street is able to do so safely. And lastly, you can stay up to date with this project and any other ATLDOT project by following us on social media. We're on almost every platform, Nextdoor, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at ATLDOT. And then lastly, we'll be sure to share these slides from tonight on the website. If you go to atlantagA.gov /projects, if you search for LMIG 2021, you'll see these projects there, as well as the materials for this project. So now that's actually the conclusion of the presentation that we have for you. We'll turn it over to you guys and open it up for any questions or comments that you may have, and we'll try our best to answer them.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So we have a comment and maybe 2 comments from Mark. So let me go to those and I'll give you his comment. From Mark K, can you consider a stop sign for Argonne at 5th? And the second comment he made was sharrows will nicely reinforce that 5th is a good street for bikes and vehicles together. Thanks.
And I'm sorry, that was stop signs at Argonne
and 5th.
Argonne and Fifth?
Yes. Mhm.
All right. Was that, I guess, to the design team? Did we look at that already?
So there's some existing stop signs at the southern intersection of Argonne and Fifth, where Fifth kind of goes a dog leg and goes to the east. The northern intersection, we did take a look at that and we're still considering it. There's a little bit of question about whether or not the two sequential stop signs within about 100 feet would be confusing for drivers, and if people would actually make that stop after just stopping 50 feet, you know, down the road. So we're still taking a look at it, but it's probably not likely, just given the intersection configuration being two offset T intersections with a very close spacing. We need to look at the turning movement conflicts and all of that very closely before we make a final decision.
Thanks, Chris.
That's it from my end. Any other questions? You can just put it in the chat.
I don't see any on my end, so yeah, feel free. We can also let you speak if you prefer to just speak up and say a comment as well, or ask a question.
Dale said, thank you for taking into account the resident input. And Mark said, thanks, everyone. Thank you,
Awesome.
guys. We need you.
Thank you. Well, if there are no other comments or questions, I guess we'll wrap it up and let you get back to your families. We thank you for joining us, and again, taking the time to send us information about the street, and even conduct some of your own studies and sending that to us. Again, we enjoy working with the community, and we want to, the best of our abilities, make sure that we're improving quality of life. But again, we also want to make sure we're creating safer streets as well. So given that, I will, I guess we'll say good night, and thank you all for joining. And again, will be sure to post the slides to the website so that you can refer to those later and share with any neighbors that may not be on the call tonight.
And drop in your email so that
Yes,
we can
yeah.
continue to stay in touch with you before you hang up. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, y'all.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. I think that's it.